Coming up on Arirang News, South Korean President Moon-Jae-in will meet on Christmas Eve with the Prime Minister of Japan. Their meeting confirmed now on the sidelines of a three-way summit with China. The South Korean Go champion, Lee Se-dol, who famously beat the artificial intelligence system AlphaGo, beats another advanced AI with an unbelievable move. And we take a look at Korea's AI startups, their projects, and what the government plans to do to help them innovate and thrive. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The leaders of South Korea and Japan will be sitting down for a summit meeting in China on the 24th of December. It's far from clear, however, whether they'll be able to make any progress in resolving the issues that have caused tensions to spike in recent months. Shin Se-min reports.
President Moon Jae-in will have a one-on-one meeting with his Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe on Christmas Eve in China during the Korean leader's two-day trip to the country next week. An official at South Korea's presidential office, referring to remarks made by the Japanese Prime Minister earlier this month, said that the details of the meeting between Moon and Abe are being fine-tuned. The Japanese PM had previously laid out plans for his overseas trip to China this month and said that he plans on holding talks with the leaders of South Korea and China on the 24th on the sidelines of the trilateral summit. Abe reportedly promised to exert his best efforts for diplomacy with Korea. Much of the focus will be on whether the two leaders can set the stage for an improvement in relations, which had reached possibly their lowest point since the establishment of diplomatic ties in 1965. Tensions between the two had ratcheted up late last year when South Korea's top court ordered Japanese firms to pay compensation for wartime forced labor. Tokyo soon retaliated against the court's decision by placing restrictions on exports of high-tech materials to Korea, which led Seoul to consider ending their military intel sharing pact with Japan, although the termination of that pact was eventually averted. The two leaders briefly met on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Bangkok in October, and the top diplomats of the two sides also met to discuss the trade route and issues over their wartime history. South Korea's top office had earlier announced that the president will be going on a two-day trip to China from the 23rd to mark the 20th anniversary of cooperation between Seoul, Beijing, and Tokyo. President Moon may also hold sideline talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang on top of the three-way talks on the 24th in Chengdu, Sichuan province. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Moon is set to meet today at the Blue House with Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. They'll be discussing ways to boost cooperation in the areas of ICT, biohealth, and energy, as well as the peace process on the Korean peninsula. The presidential office says the leaders will talk about ways to boost economic ties and create inclusive societies, especially with the summit coinciding with the 60th anniversary of their diplomatic relations. Another hot topic is likely to be the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, Pyongyang and Washington having held two of their working-level talks this year in Sweden. After their summit, President Moon will host Löfven for an official dinner at the Blue House. On Monday, China and Russia suggested at the UN that the sanctions on North Korea be eased. Now the U.S. is sending its top envoy on North Korea to Beijing to try and convince China that it needs to keep up the pressure. Oh Jung-hee tells us more.
The U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, is to visit China later this week in a move to align efforts to keep sanctions pressure on North Korea. The U.S. State Department announced Biegun's visit to China through a press release on Tuesday. It explained that his visit is to meet Chinese officials to discuss the need to maintain international unity on North Korea. The announcement comes only a day after China and Russia submitted a draft resolution to the UN Security Council that calls for an easing of North Korea sanctions. It proposes lifting the ban on exports of seafood and textiles, as well as North Koreans working abroad, and allowing South and North Korea to work on rail and road connection projects. The U.S. State Department reacted to this by saying that now is not the time to consider offering premature sanctions relief. That message was repeated by the White House on Tuesday. Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, said that the U.S. won't ease sanctions on the North until it sees complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. Meanwhile, as Biegun is expected to stay in the East Asia region until Friday, observers say that he could also still be waiting for North Korea's response to his proposal to meet. The U.S. envoy sent a message to his North Korean counterparts through a press conference in Seoul on Monday that it's time for them to do their jobs and that Pyongyang knows how to reach the U.S. 우정희, Arirang News.
The U.S. has been trying to get South Korea to send forces to the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's main shipping routes for oil, which Iran has been threatening to close. Now Seoul says it's decided to participate. Kim Ji-hyun reports.
A South Korean military source has confirmed local media reports that the country has decided to participate in a mission to ensure the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz upon requests from the U.S. and as a way to support its alliance with Washington. The source said the decision was made last Thursday by members of the National Security Council's Standing Committee. Seoul has told Washington that it plans to send a liaison officer next month and then a destroyer by February. It said the South Korean officer will work at the Bahrain-based International Maritime Security Concept to make preparations for the destroyer's arrival. Ultimately, South Korea's Cheonghae unit, currently deployed to the Gulf of Aden on an anti-piracy mission off the coast of Somalia close to the strait, will participate as well. The government is said to have reviewed methods of additional deployments, which needs the National Assembly's approval, since the current motion for the unit is limited to one destroyer and no more than 320 military personnel. Seoul's defense ministry reiterated Wednesday it's considering many options on how to contribute to the international community's efforts to protect South Korean nationals and ships in the vicinity of the strait. It's expected the government is to strategically continue its ambiguity on the issue to gain an upper hand in defense cost-sharing talks with Washington being held this week in Seoul. Apart from diplomatic reasons, though, the government is known to have mulled over the military's role in the Strait of Hormuz due to the region's significance in crude oil procurement. South Korea's oil tankers ship 70% of all imported crude through the Strait of Hormuz from oil-producing countries such as Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Kim Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. have wrapped up their latest round of negotiations on sharing the costs of U.S. troops on the Korean peninsula. The 2 days of meetings in Seoul will likely be the last for the year. The specifics of the discussions haven't yet been revealed. A round of talks in November, though, broke down, with the U.S. demanding South Korea cough up $5 billion, 5 times what they pay under the current deal, which expires this month. Seoul says the figure must be fair and mutually acceptable. Prospects are dim that the two sides will sign a deal this week, and negotiations will likely stretch into the new year. In baseball, South Korean pitcher Kim Kwang-hyun will get the chance to fulfill his dream of playing in the American big leagues. He signed a 2-year contract with the St. Louis Cardinals. Park Se-young has more.
Pitcher Kim Kwang-hyun is joining the St. Louis Cardinals in the 2020 season. The Cardinals announced the signing of the 31-year-old left-hander on Tuesday and introduced him at a press conference at Busch Stadium. The 2-year contract is reportedly worth $8 million. In 2019, his 12th season with the SK Wyverns in the KBO, Kim was 17-6 with a 2.51 ERA and 180 strikeouts. He has a lifetime record of 136.77 with a 3.27 ERA. Kim was posted for Major League Baseball teams on December 5th, the second time he had been posted. The Cardinals feel their need for a left-hander in their rotation and make Kim just the second South Korean pitcher to don their red and white uniform after Oh Seung-wan, who played for them between 2016 and 2017. Kim also becomes the 4th South Korean player to sign a major league deal via posting after Ryu Hyun-jin in 2012, Kang Jung-ho in 2015, and Park Byung-ho in 2016. Currently the only left-hander in the Cardinals' rotation, Kim said during the press conference that the best scenario would be to be a starting pitcher, but stressed he's ready to take on any role for the team. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
The South Korean Go master Lee Se-dol has beaten another AI program. Lee Se-dol is the only human to have beaten Google's AlphaGo in a match 3 years ago. This time for Lee's retirement, it's a 3-game series against an AI called Handol, developed here in Korea, and Lee won the first round. Our Kan-hyung-woo was at the match and he joins us now. Hyung-woo?
Right, Devin. So what a win for South Korean Go master Lee Se-dol once again, against another AI opponent. But before today's match, most experts and analysts expected Lee to lose today's first game. But his AI opponent, Handol, as you just said, resigned, actually, which is the same result when Lee beat Google's AlphaGo in one match in 2016. Dozens of media outlets sent reporters to see whether Lee can pull off another improbable win. So the South Korean Go master started the match by placing 2 handicapped black stones to offset the program's superiority. If you're not familiar with the game of Go, or Baduk in Korean, it's a game for 2 players who take turns putting black or white stones on a 19 by 19 grid. Players need to surround their opponent's pieces with their own to win, so it's about having a bigger territory. The initial build-up went as expected, but Handol first took a jab at the Korean Go master, trying to capture these black stones in the middle. Now cornered and faced with a difficult situation, Lee picked up the stone for a critical move at the 78th turn. Commentators and experts on the spot were shocked by Lee's decision, calling it a move no one could have thought of. From there, Handol was shaken up and kept making irrational moves, eventually resigning at the 92nd turn.
Wow, so definitely sounds like a pleasant surprise for Go fans in Korea. But how is the Korean-made Handol different from AlphaGo? And when's the next match in this series?
Now, Handol is a Go-playing AI program developed by Korean gaming company NHN in December 2017. The company was actually inspired by Lee Se-dol's match against Google's AlphaGo, and then began developing the software. Now, based on a self-learning machine that studies the game's algorithm, Handol quickly incorporated a vast amount of past Go matches. Earlier this year, in January actually, Handol took on 5 of Korea's top Go players, including then world champion Park Jong-hwan, and beat them all in a relay match, whereas Lee Se-dol has not played an official match since July this year. As for the ratings that indicate a player's Go ability, the AI Handol has an estimated rating of 4,500, which compares to 3,700 for AlphaGo and about 3,500 for an average top-ranked human player. Lee Se-dol's next match against the AI will start tomorrow around noon at this same exact spot. Now, because the South Korean Go master won today, Thursday's game will begin without any handicap stones. Saturday's last match will then move to Jeollanam-do province, where Lee Se-dol was born. We'll be following up on those matches as well. Devin?
We certainly will. All right, thank you for that, Kan-hyung-woo. Now, these days, people do encounter artificial intelligence in some of their everyday devices and online experiences, but it's often clear that AI needs more emotional intelligence. Korean companies are working on that. Oh Soo-young has this report.
Sometimes you just don't know what food or beverage you feel like ordering. But for this smart ordering robot called Poker, it's written all over your face. Within just seconds of approaching the robot, it can come up with recommendations to match your mood and greet you accordingly if you're a returning customer.
It's no longer only about intelligence. The ability to process and respond to complex human emotions is becoming just as important.
Using facial recognition based on deep learning, the AI robot remembers who you are by detecting your age, gender, and physical features to offer a swift and personalised service.
For speech recognition, a lot of noise can get in the way, especially at drive-thrus. Across restaurants in the US, which use our solution, there are customers with a range of accents, so it is much easier for them to communicate through a screen and have the robots remember their special preferences and options.
This kind of mass customization of services is one of the key sectors of AI that small and medium-sized businesses are expected to thrive in. To support such ventures, the government in its national AI strategy has pledged to boost funding for startups in the field and will dish out $4.2 billion in 2020 alone. But experts say it will take more than subsidies to create Korea's own Silicon Valley.
One of the great strengths of the U.S. is its high-tech startup system. We have now 30% more high-tech startups than we did a decade ago. We found out that in California there's a high-tech startup every 6 or 7 minutes. Phenomenal when you think about it. So part of that is just the fact that in the U.S. we have what some people call permissionless innovation. You don't need to go to the government to get permission. You can just innovate.
Korea's precautionary policies on new technologies have been criticised as a barrier to innovation. The government appears to have taken heed, pledging to create a framework in 2020 that will allow firms to innovate without seeking permission. But to truly enable out-of-the-box ventures in technology, many say Korea needs to loosen strict restrictions on using data, which is seen as the fuel of AI technology. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports next year are forecast to rise to around $550 billion, an on-year increase of 3%. A report published Wednesday by the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency said exports will be led next year by semiconductors, automobiles, and ships, along with emerging products such as cosmetics and rechargeable batteries. Shipments, it said, to North America will rise by 4.2% and to China by 2.1%. There'll also be an increase in exports to major regional blocs such as the European Union and ASEAN. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Kwang-hyun, professor of global economics at Sungkyunkwan University. Dr. Kim, thank you for making time today.
Yeah, glad to be with you.
So President Moon Jae-in has nominated the former Speaker of the National Assembly, Chung Se-kyun, to serve as his new prime minister. The hope is that Jung's experience in business and economic policy will help Korea get through these difficult economic circumstances at home and abroad. What do you make of his appointment?
Yeah, everybody hopes so. But personally, I think his rich experience in business kind of management cannot be a real guarantee for the positive and hopeful future of the Korean economy. As well known to all kind of latest kind of Korean economic problem is rather structural. So in that context, I think, say, in addition to his effort and in addition to his pro-business style, I would say the real organized and kind of active policy effort in terms of the industrial policies to boost up the international competitiveness of the major Korean industry would be the real stepping stone to improve the Korean economy. Anyhow, overall, definitely his pro-business style and his rich experience cannot be really interpreted as a bad kind of signal for the near future Korean economy.
Right. Well, one of those external issues has been trade in the region. The U.S. and China, though, have struck a Phase 1 trade deal. Still, though, lots of uncertainty coming from abroad. Boris Johnson's put a no-deal Brexit back on the table. Unrest continues in Hong Kong. What kind of impact could these have on the Korean economy in the near term?
Yes, as you mentioned, even if the United States and China has announced that they had reached a deal, but still that the so-called mini deal has lots of loopholes. Say even in the biggest points they announced, there is a kind of $160 billion kind of Chinese promise to import U.S. agricultural products. It does not show any concrete kind of timeline and the details. So even with respect to that small mini trade deal, there are lots of uncertainties. But still, more kind of significant and basic issues such as an U.S. approach to change Chinese kind of government-controlled industrial policies and government-controlled export and import control. All those issues remains as quite a rocky field for future negotiation and also future possible tension between two countries. And in addition to that, as you mentioned, so-called no Brexit uncertainties are still ongoing. So with these increasing international uncertainties, we can say the only way for Korean economy to solidify for the possible stable future would be to seek the real technological market power and market leadership. Otherwise, as long as Korea remains as it's just a kind of what keeps the marginal competitiveness in those major industries, all these uncertainties might be a real serious threat. So I think the urgent issue for Korean economy is to make more organized efforts to retain and recover technological market leaderships.
Korean exports going up next year, though, according to industry.
We hope so, but who can say?
Indeed.
We have to see the result. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Bank of Korea is projecting inflation next year going up also to around 1%. Of course, it's been much lower than that this year, around 0.4%, and far from the target of 2%. So, Dr. Kim, what's your outlook on inflation?
Yeah, this is another strong sign that even after the South Korean government's massive kind of public expenditure program, still the kind of inflation target that is, as you mentioned, 2%, has not been reached a long way from the current status. So it implies that kind of latest government decision to implement a very active and massive increase in the government kind of actions in terms of the public expenditures in the industrial policies and also including welfare expenditure, all those government expansionary policy can be supported by these quite a dismal performance in inflation rate. But however, although this low inflation rate provides a strong rationale for expansionary kind of policies, still those expansionary policies should have a very concrete kind of and explicit goals, especially in terms of its kind of concrete and material plans to improve the industrial competitiveness. The simple expansion of government expenditure in the general welfare program might end up with another quite a dismal outcome in next year. So I would say the most urgent issue again would be government kind of reshape its kind of public expenditure policy, focusing on recovering industrial competitiveness in major leading industries.
So quality rather than quantity, perhaps.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Kim, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So the year 2020 is just around the corner, and the producers of the American network ABC have released the lineup for their special program for New Year's Eve. And on the stage there at Times Square will be the South Korean boy band BTS. Our Kim Kwang-hyun tells us more.
South Korean boy band BTS will ring in 2020 in the Big Apple. The 7 members of the band are slated to be at New York's Times Square, performing live for the first time on ABC's New Year's Eve special program. According to the broadcaster's social media accounts, BTS will perform live on Dick Clark's New Year's Rocking Eve with Ryan Seacrest 2020, which will be broadcast live on ABC from 8 p.m. local time on New Year's Eve. The New Year's Rocking Eve show has been held every year since 1972. It takes place at several locations across the U.S., such as Los Angeles, New Orleans, and Miami, as well as New York, and is viewed by up to 25 million Americans. This is BTS's second time to be on the show, as they did a pre-recorded performance in 2018. This year's ABC show will include performances by artists such as hip-hop star Post Malone, country singer Sam Hunt, and Alanis Morissette. The producers of the show said they are lucky to have superstars like BTS and promised the audience would be able to have a memorable New Year's Eve in Times Square. Meanwhile, BTS are also slated to perform at annual events by South Korean broadcasters KBS and SBS. The event for SBS will be at KOTRA Skydome in Seoul on 25th. An event for Korean public broadcaster KBS will be at Kintex in Goyang on 27th. Kim Kwang-hyun, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.